The chaos in London is showing no signs of letting up after Parliament rejected the proposed Brexit deal for the third straight time.
Welcome to Plain English, the podcast that goes at the right speed for English language learners. Listen now and read the transcript online at plainenglish.com. Now, here's Jeff, your host for today's episode.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Plain English. I'm Jeff. JR is the producer, second in command, and you are part of the best audience in the world. You know why? I have wanted to do another Brexit episode for a few weeks now, but I always thought, we've done 3 of them. People are sick of hearing about Brexit. But then one of your fellow listeners, Rodolfo from Ecuador, asked me why I'm not doing more Brexit episodes. He even said it should be its own category on the website. So Rodolfo, thank you for allowing me, for giving me permission to do a 4th episode on this topic, because I have wanted to do another one for a while. And it is important. It's one of the most important issues in the English-speaking world today. If you have not heard those episodes before, I will give you the episode numbers, and you can either find them on your podcast app, in Spotify, or on the website. To get them on the website, just go to plainenglish.com/ and then the number. So the first one was episode 80. So you get that at plainenglish.com/80. The others were numbers 105 and 113. And now we are on episode 143. So today's transcript is available online for you to read at plainenglish.com/143. Listen to this. Do you want to know the headline I put on the website for episode 80 back in August 2018? Here it is exactly. With deadline looming, Britain and EU still have no deal on Brexit. If I were lazy, I could just copy that and put it on today's episode too. All right, real quick before we get started on the main content, here are a couple of ways to get in touch. To get emails from the show, sign up at plainenglish.com/mail, MAIL. If you prefer WhatsApp, drop me a note at +1 312 967 8757. March 29th was supposed to be the date on which Britain left the EU. Instead, Parliament engaged in what has become a depressing ritual, voting down a Brexit proposal from Prime Minister Theresa May's government. It was the 3rd straight defeat of the same deal, although it was defeated by a lower margin than in previous attempts. Here's where things stand. The deadline is now April 12th, just less than 2 weeks from now. The deal to leave the EU that the Prime Minister negotiated with Europe has been voted down 3 consecutive times in her own parliament. The MPs obviously don't support the deal. The MPs are the members of parliament. That's what they're called. So is it possible that the MPs want to crash out of Europe with no treaty, no deal with the EU at all? No, that is not possible because they also voted down that idea. So Parliament has voted against the idea of leaving without a deal. They have voted 3 times against the deal Theresa May negotiated. So apparently they want a different deal, but that would mean reopening negotiations with the EU, which the EU ministers are reluctant to do. This has become an unending nightmare for the current government. Patience in Brussels is wearing thin. Is there a way out? Theresa May has been inching closer to either resigning as Prime Minister or calling fresh elections. About a month ago, she told her Conservative Party that she would step down as Prime Minister before the next elections take place. And last week, in an attempt to persuade her colleagues to vote for her negotiated deal, she said she would resign if the deal passed and let someone else see Brexit through to its conclusion. After she lost again, she hinted that she might call fresh elections. It is not a good sign that she is most persuasive when she is promising to go away. A new election would not clarify things because the Brexit issue is not split along party lines. Unlike in many issues, there isn't one party for and one party against the issue. Part of the Conservatives are for it, but many are against it. For the opposition Labour Party, the same dynamic exists. Some in favor, some against. So a new election might deliver different MPs, but it wouldn't make coming to an agreement on this critical issue any easier. The opposition Labour Party is no more coherent on this issue than the Conservatives are. If you heard the previous episode we did about Brexit, then you know what I think. The only way to know whether people want to accept the negotiated deal, to leave with no deal, or to stay in the EU after all, the only way to know what they want is to ask them again in a referendum. Put the question directly back to the people. Now, I know that voting again is not a good option, but as I said last time, I do think it is the least bad option. Meanwhile, all the uncertainty is causing headaches for business. 9 out of 10 businesses want some type of agreement, some type of deal, given the havoc likely if Britain crashes out with no deal at all. Even so, they have to be prepared for the worst. The biggest disruption of a so-called hard Brexit, where they leave with no deal. The biggest disruption would be getting goods into the country. So any firm that relies on imports is affected. Take car makers, for example. Fearing controls at the border, BMW, Honda, and Land Rover idled their factories for the whole month of April. The idea was to sit out the first month of chaos. Well, now Britain is not leaving on March 29th, but it's too late to start up production again now that the exit date might be further delayed. Other companies that distribute food and medicine have they've rented refrigerated warehouse space that they were planning to use to stockpile supplies. They may not need that space now, but they have to keep it just in case Britain leaves with no deal on April 12th. Other firms have been gradually importing and stockpiling their own goods and supplies in Britain, but many small manufacturers have to do so on credit, meaning they had to borrow the money and pay interest while their stockpiles sit there. Obviously, the longer this takes, the more money this costs these small manufacturers. Many other companies have just put production and investment on hold while the political situation sorts itself out. The longer that takes, the worse it is for both the British and European economies. One business group told Parliament to stop this circus. So there may be some hope of that. Back in Westminster, Parliament is this week holding a series of indicative votes. These are non-binding votes, meaning they are just for discussion. They won't have the force of law, but they are intended to determine broadly what kind of deal the MPs would support. Perhaps after this series of votes, we will know more about what Britain's elected representatives think their country's relationship with Europe should look like. If they do that, they could then put the idea to a referendum so they can confirm the consensus agreed to in Parliament. That would then let Britain conduct effective negotiations with the EU, which is how it should have been done in the first place. That would take time, however. Britain has squandered the almost 3 years since the people voted to leave in June 2016. If they finally decide, as a country, what they want their future relationship with Europe to be, they will have to go back to Brussels, ask for another extension, and then use the time to negotiate that deal with the EU. Ironically, a new election for the European Parliament is due in June of this year. So Britain faces the very real possibility of having to elect new members of the European Parliament 3 years after they voted to leave. Sorry, wrong button. You get the point. There we go. So the government had commemorative 50 pence coins printed with the date March 29th to celebrate its departure from the EU. Those will have to be melted down. Maybe they should have taken the effort they devoted to the celebratory coin and devoted it instead to making sure an orderly exit actually happened. Today's expression is going to be wear thin. And this was a good day for me because as soon as I typed it when I was writing the episode, I knew that was the expression I wanted to do. It doesn't always work out like that. Sometimes I get to the end of the main topic and I have to reread it 3 or 4 times to get an expression to write about next. But then if I'm on the fence, if I don't know if the one I picked is a good one, I text JR and I ask him. And half the time he says, no, that's obvious. Or no, it's a cognate and it means the same thing in Spanish. So I have to go looking for another one. But this time was easy, wear thin. Before I get to that though, I wanted to remind you about the offer for a free audiobook with Audible, available at plainenglish.com/book, B-O-O-K. The deal works like this. You can sign up for a free trial membership that lasts a month. In that month, you get to download one book, which is yours to keep for free forever, no matter what. If you continue as a member, you get one audiobook every month for about $15 per month. But if you don't want to pay, just cancel the trial membership after you get your free book. That's it. You don't have to pay anything. They have all the details at plainenglish.com/book, B-O-O-K. I just read a book called The Happiness Advantage by a psychologist called Shawn Achor. It was all about the science of happiness and why that's important at work and in your personal life. It's funny, easy to understand, but backed by the latest science. The Happiness Advantage, and it's available as an audiobook actually at Audible. So you can get that as your free book at plainenglish.com/book. Patience in Brussels is wearing thin. The ministers in the European capital want to give Britain the opportunity to approve the deal they negotiated with Theresa May, but they don't want to just blindly give extension after extension. They want this to be over so they can get on with their business either with or without the UK. Their patience for all the chaos in London is wearing thin. That means they are running out of patience. They are getting frustrated. They are not going to be as nice about this issue in a few months' time. Their patience is wearing thin. Think about a piece of clothing that you wear over and over. You wash it every week. You pack it in suitcases when you travel. You sleep in it. Eventually, the fabric wears thin. It gets weaker and weaker, thinner and thinner. And that's where the expression, my patience is wearing thin comes from. Anyone that grew up with English-speaking parents, like I did, no doubt heard this phrase throughout childhood. Moms and dads say this all the time. My patience is wearing thin. Are you making noise late at night while mom and dad are trying to relax or talk on the phone? My patience is wearing thin, they might tell you. Playing outside and then tracking mud all over the kitchen floor. My patience is wearing thin, mom might say, if it's her job to clean it up. If you keep showing up late to class, your teacher's patience might wear thin. If you announce you're going to leave an organization, but you keep asking to stay in for a few more months, that organization's patience is going to wear thin, as the UK is now learning. This is how you use the word wear thin most of the time. More than half the time you say someone's patience is wearing thin, but you can use it with other words. And you can use it when you want to say that something is overused. That thing is not effective anymore. If you keep showing up to class late and you always say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I couldn't find a parking space." You say that every time. You're always like, "Oh, sorry, I couldn't find a parking space," every day. After a couple of times, that excuse is going to wear thin. It's just not going to work anymore. If you always have trouble finding a parking space, then maybe you need to leave your house earlier. That excuse is wearing thin after a couple of times. A joke can wear thin. Maybe it's funny the first time, but then 4 or 5 times later, it's just not funny anymore. The joke has worn thin. Oh, speaking of clothes wearing thin, I'm creeping toward a full Marie Kondo evaluation of my closet. I started with shoes yesterday. I'm donating about 6 pairs of shoes that just do not give me joy anymore. I then did belts. I have too many belts, usually because I forget to bring one on a trip, so I have to buy a belt at my destination. So there are at least 5 belts that I'm consciously not bringing into my future. One of these days, I'll get to all the stuff in the drawers and hanging on the racks in my closet. But I have to tell you, the Marie Kondo mentality is working for me. I even said thank you to the items I'm discarding. I looked at a belt. I'm not even joking. And I said, "Thank you for holding up my pants that one day in New York after I forgot to pack a belt in my suitcase. I really needed you for that important meeting, but it's time for you to serve another person." And I put that belt in the pile to donate. It felt good. If you haven't heard the episode where we talk about Marie Kondo, you can find it online at plainenglish.com/136. Thanks again for being with us. Don't forget to check out Audible for a free audiobook at plainenglish.com/book. JR and I will be back on Monday. If you're into engineering or architecture, you'll want to listen on Monday. Who am I kidding? Everyone will want to listen on Monday. But if you're really into engineering and stuff like that, you'll want to listen. That's because we are going to talk about Europe's first underwater restaurant. It's in Norway, and it's called simply Under. And we're going to talk about how they built it, how they got it underwater, what's on the menu, and what the views are like from down under the sea. It's been fun reading about it, so I know you'll like the episode that's coming up next on Plain English on Monday, April 8th. See you then.